Sean, we've got conference final action. We're down to 4 teams now. Game 1 of the Rangers and Panthers is tonight. We're recording this Wednesday afternoon from the lovely NHL office just down the street from Madison Square Garden, where they're going to play Game 1. Are you ready for the conference final round?
I am ready, Dan.
Yes.
I am so ready. I'm fired up. I might be as fired up as Paul Maurice.
That's hard because, listen, this morning, Wednesday morning, Paul Maurice at the morning skate was in Paul Maurice form. Brilliant stuff, talking all about the series, about Jacob Trouba as a young player when he had him in Winnipeg, Jack Roslovic as well, and just talking about fired up and just got to enjoy this. You just got to have some fun. You got to make sure you enjoy this was really the message I got.
And that's what I'm doing. I'm enjoying this. So I'm ready to go. But yeah, no, he was great, and it's going to be a great series. Both you and I are going to cover that one. The West starts tomorrow. I believe that's Thursday. I kind of lose track of days of the week. About this point, I usually have to put a Post-it on my computer, and I still get it wrong. But I do believe tomorrow's Thursday, and that'll be Game 1 in the West between the Edmonton Oilers and the Dallas Stars. And we'll have Derek Van Diest and Nick Kotstalnica and Tracy Myers all over that series.
And I think Zeisberger is going to be covering a little bit of that.
A little later.
Yeah, a little later on. So we got a lot of stuff obviously going on. There's all the coaching stuff going on as well. Just before we started recording, Jim Hiller named the full-time coach of the Los Angeles Kings a couple days ago. You had Craig Berube take the big job in Toronto. We're going to get to all that. But, Sean, I wanted to start with the series that we're going to cover. Yes, Game 1 is in a few hours from now, right? So the conversation we're having now could be different if we were having it tomorrow, but the big picture of this series will not change after Game 1 unless there's some unfortunate injury or whatever, something like that happens. But the big picture of this series, to me, what it comes down to, among many things, is Shesterkin and Bobrovsky. And it's a lot of playoff series comes down to the goaltending. But in this one, you have 2 Vezina Trophy winners. And it's the first time since Dominik Hasek and Patrick Roy met in the conference final in 2002 that you've had 2 Vezina Trophy winners in the conference final round going up against each other. Shesterkin's been brilliant in these playoffs. Bobrovsky's been very good. And a big reason why the Rangers are here, and I think you'd agree with me, is because of Shesterkin and just being really good against Carolina, and Freddie Anderson and Pyotr Kochetkov not being nearly as good as Shesterkin. So as good as Bobrovsky is, and he's just going to have to be that much better, I think.
I don't think so. I think you hit it on the head. Look, the Carolina Hurricanes almost beat the Rangers with subpar goaltending, with a goalie who was at .897 for the 6 games, and they almost beat him. So if Bob's Bob, Florida's a better team than Carolina, and there's where we're at. I don't think he has to steal the show.
Well, okay, I see what you're saying. The games are close. The Rangers had the comeback win. We should get into a little bit of that, too, how they did that in Game 6 and carryover effect, if you will.
Did we talk, first of all, about the autopsy that you were ready to perform?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I knew you were going to bring that up. How long did we take? A couple minutes before you get into it? Yes. So, backstory, Game 6, Sean and I are in Raleigh. Covering Game 6 of the Rangers and Hurricanes series, and it's after 2 periods, and I turned to Sean, and I said, that's it. The Rangers are dead. They're done. And I don't know if they can win Game 7 either, and I actually had written something just for myself at that point, because you never know what's going to happen in the last 20 minutes. I wrote, the Rangers are down to 1 game to win 1 game, and that may not be enough against the Carolina Hurricanes. Well, maybe they heard me, Sean. I don't know, because maybe Chris Kreider heard me. A natural hat trick in Game 6, 3rd period. The Rangers come back, and that's why they're here. But again, it's the it factor that the Rangers have, and they've had it all season, and I think they've had it through these playoffs. Shesterkin's a big part of that it factor. So I look at what you're saying about Bobrovsky, and look, he went up against Jeremy Swayman, who was really good, right? And Bobrovsky was Bobrovsky, and here are the Panthers in this round. I think as the rounds go on, you have to elevate, and I think Bobrovsky's going to have to elevate, because the guarantee in this series that I'll give is that Igor Shesterkin will be good. That's the one guarantee that I'll give in this series.
And he was good last round, right?
He was exceptional last round. He faced 37 shots a game, and he had a 919 save percentage. And you say that the Hurricanes almost beat the Rangers. They went in 6 games. They went out in 6 games. It didn't go to 7. They had opportunities to beat the Rangers. They had opportunities to beat Shesterkin, but they didn't. Almost sure, but they still lost in 6.
Yeah, and they scored 4 goals in the 2 games before that, and 3 goals in the first 2 periods of the elimination game. Who's a better offensive team?
I would think the Florida Panthers should be a better offensive team. Yes, I would agree with that. And I think Shesterkin's going to have to raise his game too. But his game was really high level, and he's been the best goalie in the playoffs. Now, I think you could say he's been the best goalie in the playoffs. In my opinion, he has been the best goalie in the playoffs, and he's the lock for me in this series, that he's going to be really good. Is that going to be enough to win the series? Well, I mean, a lot of other factors depend on that.
Yeah, and look, Paul Maurice said before the series started at his pre-series availability here in New York City, he's like, look, we don't think we're going to put 4 or 5 past them. You know, we're not walking into a game saying, oh, we're going to put 4 or 5 past the Ranger goalie, so just don't give up 5. And that's not who they are. These are going to be 2-1, 3-2 games. Do I think that they can get to Shesterkin for 3 goals in a game? Yeah, I do, because they're a tougher offensive team than the Carolina Hurricanes were. All series, the Carolina Hurricanes talked about getting in front of Shesterkin, taking his eyes away, using a quantity of shots and traffic to beat the law of averages. And then they never got in front of him.
Yeah.
Florida's going to get in front of him. Florida is going to be in his kitchen. They're going to rattle some pots and pans. If you don't think that Matthew Tkachuk isn't going to bump into Shesterkin 87 times in this 7-game series, if it goes 7, I'll take those over-under odds right now. So I just think it's going to be that much harder. And I just want to say, because it seems like I'm being very negative about the Rangers, that when you were feeling for a pulse and not finding one, I said, well, they're not done yet. They got one more act in them. I thought it was going to come in Game 7. I didn't know whether they were going to win it or not, but it came in Game 6, and it came in an iconic way with Kreider getting the hat trick with a little help from Freddie Anderson.
Yeah.
On the goal in his feet that changed the whole tenor of the third period. So full props to the Rangers, but I think the Florida Panthers are a much more difficult opponent than the Carolina Hurricanes.
That's saying a lot. I mean, Carolina had a great season. You know, I mean, it is saying a lot. They had a great season. They were 3 points behind the Rangers, you know, in the course of this season. I mean, listen, it is tight, okay? And the Florida Panthers, if they went up against the Carolina Hurricanes, I think it would be a great series too, and it would be really close. Let me ask.
It was last year, but the difference is Florida has goal scorers. Carolina doesn't.
Was it close last year? The games were close, but Florida won them all.
It was close, dude. I covered it. It was close. I'm not going to go the Rod Brindamore route and say we didn't get swept because they lost 4 games. But when you lose 4 games and every one of them is a 1-goal game and there's 7 overtimes and 5 overtimes involved.
The games are close.
It's
yes.
close.
But they don't have that extra.
They didn't have a game breaker. Florida has several game breakers.
Yes, and that's why they're here, and they're playing the Rangers. And I love the fact, listen, the best teams are here. If you look at the East, the conference final in general, of the Oilers, Stars, Rangers, and Panthers, since November 12th, when Chris Knobloch took over, 4 points separated these teams. And the Oilers were the best team in the league with 97. We're talking since November 12th. Then there was Winnipeg with 94. But then Dallas had 94, the Rangers had 93, and Florida had 93. So these 4 teams were in the top 5 since November 12th. And I think you have to take into account the start the Oilers had. But the Rangers were the top team in the league through the season. Dallas was number 2. Florida had the 5th most points, and Edmonton had the 9th. But again, that also takes into account their tough start. So you have, I do believe, the 4 best teams here, and they've earned their way here to do it. And that makes for a really great, interesting, wide open conference final round. I think it's going to be just like that. I would expect long series, 6-7 game series in both of these.
I fully expect that, and I think this series is going to be a war. And in terms of hockey, right?
Yes.
Like, it's just going to be a real physical series. Like, I think that's what Carolina wanted to play, and at times they did, and they were wearing the Rangers down late in that series. Their forecheck was finally coming to bear. The Rangers were making some mistakes in their own end. This is a team that'll forecheck the wheels right off of you, and I do think that the Rangers are a really, really fast team. They're going to get slowed down by the gauntlet that they're going to have to run to get into the offensive zone.
So I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway, just about by the way you're talking in regards to the series. But I believe in an it factor when it comes to sports. I believe in that stuff. Do you think there is something there? And do the Rangers have that? I mean, they 28 comeback wins in the regular season, 6 now in the playoffs, I believe it is. The way they came back in Game 6, they look dead, down 3-1. They manage it to come back, and who does it, like you said, in an iconic way with, for them, an iconic player. Is there an it factor here that belongs to the Rangers now? Do they have it, and is that an advantage?
Yeah, I think that they have an innate belief in themselves that they can win any game and that they are a team of destiny, you know, and it is a year ending in a 4. So, you know, you have 1994 and 2014 were the Cup winning team in 94 and the Cup finalist team in 14. So maybe the power of the 4, the 4 is with them.
Need 4 wins.
Yeah, and.
To get to the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, they need 8 wins.
Yes.
But I think Florida has it too, right? And they have a mission. They lost in the final last year, and it stings and it hurts, and it's driven them all year. Look, the Florida Panthers should have been a mess. You talked about how good they were. They should have been a mess. The price that they paid to lose the final last year was heinous. Matthew Tkachuk. Broken everything. No Montour. No Ekblad. Like Paul Maurice basically said, coming into the season, the first 20 games, I thought we were going to be brutal. And they weren't. Because the rest of the team said, whether they said it out loud or to themselves over the summer, in order for us to get back and to change the narrative, which almost nobody does, we need to be better. We need to be tougher. We need to be more disciplined. And we need to do the hard things in the game that we sometimes skip on, especially in the regular season. And they've done all that. And now they're deeper than they were last year. They're more disciplined and they're more focused.
You know, I brought this up on the podcast previous to this episode, but I think it speaks to what the Panthers are too. It was back in March, early March, when they were here at Madison Square Garden. And I asked Paul Maurice, they were rolling at that time. And I asked Paul Maurice, is the worst part about this, it's March, right? Because you're playing hockey right now that you want to be playing in April and May and June. But it's March. And they, you know, laughed it off and whatnot. But then they went into that tailspin a little bit. They slumped. And they found their way back. I think dealing with that, finding your way back, was a big thing for this team. If they had just rode it, you're peaking too early. You're peaking too early. They hit a tailspin. They got some injuries. And I think what it did is it jolted them a little bit and reminded them of who they are, which is a deep team that needs its depth in order to be successful. Yes, you need your top guys to be successful, but needs its depth to be successful. It was a bad time, but a reminding time for them. They're better for it now. As a result of that, I mean, we see this happen a lot for the Rangers. It happened in January, right? I mean, they looked completely lost. Igor Shesterkin looked completely lost in January, and they started to find their way, and they found their way back by winning 10 games in a row in February, right? So, but that point of the season for the Panthers, I think, is a big part of what's happening for them right now, is that they didn't just steamroll their way into the playoffs. They had to earn the top spot in the division. They had to win it. They had to play for it late in the season.
Yeah, and it's different than coming in last day of the season, not knowing you're going to be in, and then scratching and clawing your whole way and kind of riding that momentum. They're more the hunted than the hunter, and that's a different experience, and I think that they're better for it. And look, we could talk all we want, but Game 1 is tonight, and Game 2 is on Saturday.
Friday.
See, I got my
you're
days.
getting them days mixed up
I
already.
need a Post-it note.
Yes.
Game 2 is on Friday. And I don't think you'll know anything until after that, right? Look, Paul Maurice said you'll know after the first period if you're right and if they're right and if something's wrong. Is it you or is it them? But I think it's going to take longer.
Yeah.
I feel like, especially with a few days off, it's going to take a little while to get into their games. But there is one guarantee I can make. The Garden's going to be rocking tonight.
It's going to be great. I mean, it really is. And you know, it's always interesting to me, before we get to the Western Conference Final, it's always interesting to me when teams come into Madison Square Garden and I'm in the visiting locker room and I'm hearing the questions, especially around, you know, as more media comes through and they talk about the Garden, and the players are always like, oh, man, what a great place to play. This is unbelievable. This is the place you want to be and all that. And, Sean, you wrote about that this morning, you know, off the morning skate. I always look at it and I'm like, wow, they're just basically saying that where they play isn't nearly as good. You know, like that's kind of how I take it. But no, it's Madison Square Garden. It's the playoffs. It's the conference final round. It's going to be rocking. And you know what? The other part of this too. 2 years ago, the Rangers got in, and they won 2 emotional series, and they got to the conference final against Tampa. But there was like a whirlwind. It was just like, whoa, where are we? We're way too early, right? Last year, the Panthers got in on the last day. You know, they win an emotional first-round series. They get to the Stanley Cup final. They run out of steam. They run out of bodies. These are 2 teams that have experienced heartache in a different way. I'm not comparing losing in the Eastern Conference Final to losing in the Stanley Cup final, but a lot of the players from the 22 Rangers team are there, and obviously a lot of the players from the Panthers last year are there. That's also driving them. The feeling that they had at those times.
Oh, for sure. I think that's a huge part of it, and I think that's always a huge part of when you get this far is, you know, there's something pushing you from behind. I will say that I don't think many people think that Madison Square Garden's nicer than their building, because almost everybody plays in a more modern building than Madison Square Garden. But the Garden is the Garden.
Yep.
And not a lot of hockey histories happen there because the Rangers haven't been great, right?
No.
Like 94, they won a cup. They've been to a couple of conference finals. They were in the Stanley Cup final in 14. But there's been a lot of misery here. But it's the world's most famous arena for a reason. Everybody has played there.
All right, so what's your pick in the series?
Panthers in 7.
Panthers in 7. Okay, so the Panthers go into Madison Square Garden in Game 7 and take it. I say the Rangers, and I'm saying the Rangers in 6. The it factor matters to me. It's something. I've watched them all year, and maybe there's an innate bias of that because you see it, right? But I've seen a lot from the Florida Panthers as well to know how good they are. But it's just, I wrote about it too, Sean. There's just so much. You know, it's the 94-24, right? Okay, President's Trophy that year, President's Trophy this year. First-year coach that year, first-year coach this year. The coach in a stop he had before getting here, Mike Keenan, Peter Laviolette, lost in the Stanley Cup final with the Philadelphia Flyers. That's a weird one, okay? An eclipse, solar eclipse in 94, a solar eclipse this year. An earthquake in New York City in 94, an earthquake in New York City this year. O.J. Simpson in the news in 94, O.J. Simpson in the news for his death now. Just a lot, man. It's too much to ignore, I think.
I don't know, but the one thing you forgot, Sean Rourke. Covering in 94, first year on the NHL beat, now in 2024, covering again.
Not his last year on the NHL beat.
Knock on
wood. All right, let's go. So Game 1 at Madison Square Garden tonight, Wednesday night. We're recording this just a few hours before it. Game 2 on Friday at the Garden. Then it flips to South Florida for Game 3 on Sunday afternoon. Game 4 on Tuesday. The Western Conference Final. The Dallas Stars played 12 games in 26 days, and they were hard games. Hard hockey. You watch those games, it's just like, whoa. It takes a lot to play in those games against Vegas especially, and then against Colorado as well, and they managed to get here. There's a question, I guess, with Rope Hintz. Didn't play in games 5 and 6 for an upper body injury, but I look at the Dallas Stars, I look at the Edmonton Oilers, and I just look at Dallas, Sean, and I just go, they have everything you would need to win the Stanley Cup. Depth, defense, size, snarl, goaltending. The only thing that's lacking with the Dallas Stars right now could be the thing that takes them out, and it's their penalty kill. It's been a problem, and who's got the best power play going? The Edmonton Oilers.
Well, they better get on it because otherwise they're in deep.
Yeah, but that could be the difference right there.
It could be, but look, and this is no offense against the two teams that the Edmonton Oilers played. They haven't played Western Conference playoffs yet.
No, they got through. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. Their path was the easier path.
Yeah.
No, not easy.
No,
easier.
Easier for sure.
Yeah.
Look, the Dallas Stars beat the defending Stanley Cup champions and then the Stanley Cup champions from 2 years ago with a potential Hart Trophy winner on it and a potential Norris Trophy winner on it. Edmonton beat Vancouver without their starting goalie and without Brock Besser for Game 7.
And without Elias Pettersson playing
very
as well as we know he can play.
Yeah, so we talk about getting to a new level. Like the Oilers are going to have to jump 3.
Yeah.
They're not taking a step up. They're taking 3 steps up. As long as the Dallas Stars are the same team that just finished beating those other two teams. They've been off for a while. It may take them a little while to get back into it. But if they can find their groove again, oh boy.
Well, and that's the thing, right? They've been off for a little bit. They get their day's rest. It was so needed for them for the style of hockey that they've had to play in these playoffs. But that is a concern for me. Like when you think about their depth is a key part of this too, which is why it may be less concerning than it could be. But they've been beaten up. I mean, they've taken the battle, right? And they've won it, but they've taken their licks through 2 rounds. And I think to Florida last year, now they weren't as banged up. They're not as banged up, Dallas, at this point yet. But they've taken their licks, right? And so they have to have enough now to bring it back, but to stop the 2 of the best players in the world, or the 2 best players in the world. You know, certainly 2 of. I'll throw Nathan McKinnon in the mix there, and they did that, right? But McDavid and Draisaitl are going to have a huge say in this. And again, it goes back to me to the power play versus the penalty kill. And I'm looking forward to my notes. I wrote it down. Edmonton, 37.5%. Dallas, 69.2% on the PK. They gave up 5 power play goals to the Avalanche, but they were able to win the series. If Edmonton's power play rolls, this spells trouble for Dallas. But that's the only way. Oh, that's really the only place I see it spell trouble for Dallas. If you look at the goaltending, we just talked about it with Shesterkin and Bobrovsky at the top of the show here. There's a huge discrepancy in goaltending in this series, just in what we've seen in the playoffs. Jake Ottinger, 2.09 goals against and a 918 save percentage in much harder competition, right? Stuart Skinner, 2.87 and an 881 against the Vancouver team that doesn't take a lot of shots, doesn't generate much, and against LA, which, listen, I mean, they're a middle-of-the-pack offensive team, right? Now you're facing a much deeper team, a team that's got 2 first lines, essentially. So the goaltending is huge, but that power play for Edmonton, I keep going back to it. If it sings, that could spell doom for Dallas.
I just don't think they're going to get enough opportunities because they're going to need to go at 35%.
Yeah, if not better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to win, how many chances do you need at 35%? Because, look, Draisaitl and McDavid are leading the league in playoff scoring, but are they fundamentally greater than McKinnon and Rantanen? Not by much. And Dallas, they didn't shut them down, but they limited them to the point where Colorado's depth became an issue, and especially after Nikushkin left.
Yeah.
And I don't know that Edmonton has the depth that Colorado does. So if you neutralize, you don't have to stop them. If you can equal them in output, who wins the series?
No, it's Dallas. That's why I'm picking Dallas. I mean, I had the Rangers in 6. You have the Panthers in 7. I have Dallas. I'm going to go 6 in this series because I think Edmonton's got enough to get there, to get to Game 6. But then, it's even alarming to me when they went into you're thinking about Game 7, right, of Edmonton-Vancouver. Edmonton was in complete control of that game, right? And then they weren't. And momentum switched, and they couldn't get it back. And they were fortunate time ran out.
Happens all the time to them.
Yeah. And that's going to go the wrong way against Dallas.
They can't hold the lead. They're not great defensively. Their goaltending isn't elite, right? And we saw it with Carolina. When they lost faith in Freddie Anderson, they played a different game. They were more tentative in their own end. They wanted to stop shots from getting through. They weren't playing as aggressively, and it came back to bite them. I think when you don't have that supreme confidence in your goalie, it affects your whole game. And the one thing we didn't talk about is the coaches. Peter DeBoer has coached 972 playoff games. And I'm only lying by a little bit.
Yeah, you're off just by a little bit there.
Knobloch.
Coached, what, 12, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's his first conference final. He's on the road. Like, I if Peter doesn't dominate the line matching, I will be flabbergasted.
Yeah.
He should get every match he wants, and he's going to figure out how to limit them. I don't think he's worried about offensive matches. He's going to be worried about defensive matches. And Chris Taneff's going to be out there whenever they can put him out there against their top guys, because he's been unbelievable in this series.
Remember we had Daryl Ray on not long ago, a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about Tanev and the impact he's made with the Dallas Stars. And one of the things he was talking about was, he brought that physicality and that snarl to his, all that. But the way he is in the room was one thing that stuck out to me from that interview we had with Razor. And the other thing was his first pass out of the defensive zone, as good as it is, right? And underrated as it is. He's been amazing in these playoffs, and he's literally playing on one tooth. I think he might be down to one at this point, and I love it because he's just like, this is what my mouth looks like. I'm not faking it. Big smile all the time. Kind of reminds me of like Kenny Danico after he won the Stanley Cup. I think back to, all the years that he won it, but I think back to his last game in 2003, big smile on his face after winning, and there was like no teeth in his mouth.
I called them jagged shards.
Yeah, but then Tanev just loses another one. It's all right, ready to go. He is epitomized a little bit about what Dallas has to have, what they've gone through, what they've had to go through so far in these playoffs, and really who they are. I think.
Yeah, and look, during this break, I pretty much think that Chris Tanev is set in the cold tub the whole time. He sleeps there. He goes from there to the hyperbaric chamber and pretty much calls it a day.
Yeah. He's been good. I think other than McDavid and Draisaitl, I think we have to say that there's an advantage just wherever Dallas is. In every area for Dallas, they don't have the two best players in the series. That we know. Edmonton has the two best players in the series, but goaltending, defensive depth. I'll give you a question here: Miro Heiskanen or Evan Bouchard? Right now, I really don't think it's a debate. I think it's Miro Heiskanen for everything he does, but Bouchard's been really good in these playoffs.
Really good, but it's offensively, right? And
he's a plus 10. So
because they have, of course, but a lot of times they have the puck.
Yes,
he's still protected to a degree, and Miro is not. Like, he's out there all the time. And look, I know that Bouchard's playing a lot of minutes. It just, to me, it doesn't seem like he's defended the same caliber of players as Miro has.
Miro's playing 28 minutes a game. The only player in the playoffs who played more is John Carlson, who had to play pretty much 60 minutes for the Capitals in all 4 losses against the Rangers. So it's Miro, but I wanted to give a little shout out there to Evan Bouchard, who's been really good in these playoffs.
He's been fantastic, and Derek Van Diest, who's based in Edmonton for us, just wrote a huge Bouchard piece, and McDavid said that he's playing the best he's ever played. And look, I think he's grown in leaps and bounds. Remember last year, there was talk about how they didn't need him. Maybe they could move him for something else, that he hadn't developed quick enough. I think we've forgotten, because there's so many good young defensemen in this league. It's the hardest position, skater-wise, to master. And it used to take defensemen a really long time. You didn't see a lot of 18 and 19-year-old defensemen, and now you do, but there's still growing pains there.
Yeah, he's grown up. He really has. He's grown up, and he's playing the exact role that the Oilers need him to play too. He needs to be a scoring defenseman, and he has been. And it's not all on the power play. A lot of it's on the power play, but it's not all on the power play. There is one. I mentioned it also. By the way, just to throw this out there, Eddie Olczyk is going to be on with Darren Millard, the Chirp podcast with Darren Millard. Eddie's covering. He's going to be calling games in the Western Conference Final for Turner. So Eddie Olczyk is going to be on with Darren Millard for the Chirp podcast this week, so definitely listen to that. Check that out. Roope Hintz, and I had mentioned it. I brought it up. Like, he missed games 5 and 6 against the Avalanche with an upper body injury. We know Dallas has depth, and they can survive, an injury because of their depth. But he hasn't had a great playoffs, and now he's been banged up a little bit. If he can come back and get back to playing the way we know Roope Hintz can play, it's another huge advantage for the Dallas Stars.
Yeah, and I think they have enough as it is, right? You see their young kids come out and really shine, right? Wyatt Johnson has been fantastic. Harley's been good for them. Stankoven has been really good. Like, they have almost the perfect mix, and I think we've talked about this with Daryl when we had him on and at other times. Like, they have that perfect mix of veterans looking for their first cup and young kids who don't know any better.
Yeah. All right, that's the Western Conference Final. So that starts Thursday night with Game 1 there, Saturday Game 2. Then it flips up to Edmonton for Games 3 and 4. But off the ice, Sean. So we covered everything going on the ice, right, in the National Hockey League. And you can't ignore what's going on off the ice. I mentioned at the top, Jim Hiller, right, gets the job in L.A. Okay. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. They were a better team when Hiller took over. I think they were 21-12-1 after he took over. He's coached his first game on February 10th. They had the 10th best record in the NHL in that time. So Jim Hiller gets the job. But Craig Berube, that's the one everybody wants to talk about. I don't think either one of us are surprised that it's Craig Berube, but the message was sent loud and clear for what the Toronto Maple Leafs should be expecting. It was actually a similar message that I heard Peter Laviolette send to the Rangers when he was introduced. It was like, you better be ready to work day one, and nothing's going to come easy, and we're going to battle, and we're going to compete. And if there was a country club atmosphere, and I don't know that there was, but if there was, well, that's gone now.
And that's what Paul Maurice was like. Tkachuk was talking yesterday about how miserable camp was, and this was after going to the Stanley Cup final. Like, what you have, and camp was still miserable, and it's the foundation of everything that the Florida Panthers do and who they are and why they're here. So I think you need that, right? And I think that Toronto at this point is owed nothing. The players are owed nothing, except for what Berube is going to bring, which is a little bit of misery.
Yeah.
And that steel sharpens steel, right? Like, they need to be sharpened, and he's the guy who's going to do it.
Can they be sharpened enough, or are they too far down the road with what they've got?
The roster's flawed to me. They're a great regular season team. I don't see, when you look at the Final Four right now, even at their absolute best, can they beat any of these teams? No.
I'd give them a puncher's chance against Edmonton. because of a similar type of game.
Yeah, and a similar type of goalie.
Yeah, and a similar type of goalie. But no, I mean, and I don't mean to knock Edmonton here, right? I mean, it's just, if you're looking at the 4 teams that are remaining, I think that they're number 4. Right?
And they play a completely different
Yeah.
game than the other 3 teams.
Yeah, they do. They're here. They belong here. They won a Game 7 to get here. They deserve it. Their challenge, as we've brought up, is huge against the Dallas Stars. Similarly, I thought the Dallas Stars' challenge against the Vegas Golden Knights last year was huge. Just different, right? But Toronto, okay, I give them a puncher's chance if they played Edmonton in a series. I don't see how they beat the Panthers. I don't see how they beat the Rangers, even if the Rangers aren't nearly as dominant physically as the Panthers are. They're better and more physical and deeper, and the goaltending. I mean, the goaltending is obvious, right? And Dallas, I think Dallas is the best team in the National Hockey League. I picked them to win the Stanley Cup at the start of the season. I picked them to win the Stanley Cup at the start of the playoffs. Well, I'm not jumping off that right now. I'm still picking them to win the Stanley Cup. So I clearly don't think that Toronto has a chance against Dallas if they were to play them. But that's the Berube challenge right now. That's it. I mean, he's got to come in and he's got to change the mindset. He's got to change the culture a little bit, just like Peter Laviolette had to do with the New York Rangers, just like Paul Maurice had to do with the Florida Panthers. You know, these things have to get done.
He can run the nastiest boot camp you can ever think of, and it's not going to be enough. Until that roster gets fixed, they're a regular season team. They just, to me, they don't have the pieces that you need to go deep in the playoffs. You need an elite goaltender. You need a physical shutdown defender, and you need 4 lines. Right, 4 good lines. With the way that they're constructed up front, they can't have 4 good lines because all their money's tied up in 2.
Yeah. How do they get an elite goaltender? Do they have one? And does Joe Wall, can he be that? I mean,
I don't know.
The pedigree's not really there, right, for him to do it. Okay, Florida went out and signed Bobrovsky, right? And then he went through a ton of struggle with the Panthers before he really found his game. They found one through free agency, right? Ottinger, Dallas had him, right? Shesterkin, Rangers had him. Skinner, if you want to go there, right? Edmonton has had him, right? How do you find who's the elite goalie? Is it UC Saros? Like, is Nashville going to trade UC Saros? And can Toronto pick him up in a trade and change their roster that way? They could.
Maybe. I mean, the chatter is growing stronger and stronger, and you know there's nobody that's a bigger UC Soros fan than I. His playoff numbers are not very good. I was shocked at how bad they were. Among all the goalies, he's won the 3rd less games, I think, if you've played at least 10 games. Yeah. It's something crazy like that. And it shocked me. Look, some of those numbers were with Nashville. Against Colorado when they were really good. And, but he hasn't been great in the playoffs. And I don't know if he's that guy. You need wholesale changes, and I don't know how they're going to do it. I think Marner is the first step. If you get the pieces and you make them the right pieces, and you find somebody desperate enough to give up a number of pieces, you're on your way.
Yeah. So if they keep Marner, though, to me, that's the first guy Berube's got to go to. Almost like, all right, Mitch, you can be a two-way player here. You can be a Selke guy. Like, there's a chance there for Mitch Marner to play that way, but you better play that way, and I'm going to be on you, right? And if we've talked about this, right? If I'm Mitch Marner, I'm not agreeing to a trade, and I'm not agreeing to a contract. I'm playing out my year because if I leave and they go win, I'm the problem. If we stay and we win, well, maybe you got to pay me more, right? And if it doesn't go well, hey, maybe you trade me at the deadline, and I'll go try to win somewhere else. Who knows, right? But if they don't do anything with Marner, if it stays Marner and Matthews and Nylander and Riley, Marner's the guy that I'm going to because he's the guy that has to lift it up a little bit more, I think.
That may well be true. I think you got to change all of their games a little bit. It's a huge task. If there's anybody that's hardwired to do it, I think it's Berube. Like, you look at when he came into St. Louis, everybody was like, that team's done.
Yeah.
And he got them to the playoffs, and then in the playoffs, they were just a buzzsaw. So and maybe he changes that culture. And there were players on that team that people had questions about.
And they found a number one goalie that they didn't know they had.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe that happens in Toronto. We'll see. So so Travis Green's in Ottawa, Bannister, St. Louis, Hiller in L.A., Berube now Toronto, Lindy Ruff, Buffalo. It leaves the Devils, the Sharks, the Jets, and the Seattle Kraken without coaches right now. It's a lot of teams at this point without coaches. I mean, maybe one or two, but like I keep hearing the Devils are ready to hire a coach. Oh, the Devils are going to, and it's been weeks now.
They're doing their due diligence.
Yeah,
Dan.
all these teams are doing their due diligence.
I think if I had to put money on it, it's Sheldon Keefe, and I think that's the right move. And I don't know what the delay is. I don't know if they were in on Berube. By the way, how weird was it that the Toronto Maple Leafs announced Berube on Friday of a long weekend in Canada? Almost like they were embarrassed by it.
Well, I don't think they were, but yeah.
No, but that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
When it's bad news, you Friday news dump, 5:00 on a Friday. See you all on Monday. And then they didn't introduce him until Tuesday. But yeah, I think Sheldon Keefe's the guy in New Jersey. I look at the Devils and I see a team very similar to Toronto. And they don't need to win the cup right away. They just need to get back in the playoffs and be competitive and let that window mature.
They're similar to Toronto, but they're not full on invested in a core that is that they're invested obviously in Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt and Nico Hischier and whatnot, but there's not near as much baggage with those guys.
He can put his own stamp on this team.
And that definitely. Last one before we get out of here. This was brought up to me, and we're talking coaches now. I wanted to bring it up to you. Dan Bylsma's doing a heck of a job in Coachella Valley, right? Would you consider him for the Seattle Kraken? And if you're Dan Bylsma, do you want it? Pass, right?
Coachella Valley, baby. Palm Springs. No, all these guys are wired the same way.
The guy's won the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
He's coached in the National Hockey League. He's proven it. He's getting to live in Palm Springs. He's coaching. He's doing well. They play in a brand new building. There's interest. I don't know. It's tough to leave.
You don't think he feels like he's been besmirched?
I think he does.
A little bit.
I think he does.
And he, like everybody else who's competitive, he wants another chance to prove him wrong and stick it in everybody's face.
Yep.
And I think that'll override Palm Springs, golf courses, new building. It's a pretty good setup in Seattle.
Yeah. It is a great setup in Seattle, but he doesn't have the team to stick it in anybody's face.
But I think people know that. So even if they're just good and they make the playoffs, he's done what he needs to do. I don't think he needs to win a Stanley Cup in the next couple of years.
I don't even know if he's a candidate for the job. But
we never ever let the facts get in the way of a good story here, Dan.
Definitely do not do that. All right. We got to get to game one here pretty soon, Sean.
I need a nap. I got to find someplace in the office to do that. Maybe under my desk.
Maybe under Bob Bender's desk. You can go right under Bender's desk. This was fun. This was just the Sean and Dan show. No guests. Like I said, Eddie Olczyk on Darren Millard's podcast, The Chirp. He's doing the Western Conference Final for Turner. So, Sean, just to go back at it, you have Panthers in 7. I have Rangers in 6. We both have the Stars. You didn't give a games, though.
6.
6. Same with me. Stars in 6. Enjoy the hockey.
Happy Memorial Day.